think we're right at after 12 o'clock, so we are going to go ahead and get started. So hi, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Shannon Egan, the director of the Schmucker Art Gallery, and I'm so grateful to all of you for logging on for today's virtual gallery talk with artist Nicholas Mikros, who's joining us from Switzerland. He's Gettysburg College class of 1982, and I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And hopefully you all can see this. And before I turn the screen over to Nick, I first want to just start with the land acknowledgement that has recently been endorsed by the college, particularly when we're all gathered today to talk about a sculpture that is so importantly tied to land and to place, which is Martin Puryear's Sentinel, located right in the middle of Gettysburg College's campus. So this is just very brief, but I'd like to play it for you all.
As a member of the Gettysburg community, I respectfully acknowledge that Gettysburg College is on unceded Indigenous land, including the traditional homelands of the Susquehannock, Conestoga, Seneca and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, Lenni Lenape, and Shawnee nations, and the connections of Indigenous peoples to this land continue today. We have a responsibility to honor these connections, and as these words of acknowledgement are spoken and heard, we strive to understand our place within the past, present, and future of this Indigenous land by reflecting on our relationships with the human and other than human relatives with whom it is shared.
Okay, so thanks. So for those of you who happen to be in or near Gettysburg, I invite you to see the exhibition in Schmucker Art Gallery that has been curated by Colby Fellow and Gettysburg College art history student Merlyn Maldonado Lopez. Merlyn will be giving tours of the exhibition on October 22nd and 23rd, and she'll be talking about how some of the works included in the exhibition, the works on paper, connect to his sculpture. I also want to briefly mention that if you're interested in other gallery goings on, you're welcome to join on the Zoom link next Wednesday, October 6th, where I'll be talking about the concurrent exhibition in the gallery across the West and toward the North, Norwegian and American landscape photography with my co-curator in Norway. And also in conjunction with that exhibition, we'll be hosting another gallery talk, an in-person gallery talk with photo collector Ron Parashow on October 22nd at 4 o'clock. But in the meantime, please enjoy some of the exhibition photographs. Merlyn spent the summer talking with Nick and with Professor Alan Paulson, researching about Martin Puryear, and this is the result of that. But now, today, I'm just so excited that we're here to celebrate Martin Puryear's, the 40th anniversary of his sculpture Sentinel, and to welcome Nick Mikros. For those of you who may be a little bit unfamiliar with the sculpture, with artist Martin Puryear, and how, with how Nick Mikros was involved in the project, I just want to briefly share a little bit of background information. So in 1981, with a generous grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, Gettysburg College commissioned African-American sculptor Martin Puryear to create a work of art to commemorate the sesquicentennial anniversary of the college's founding. And so in the fall of 1982, Martin Puryear installed Sentinel. When he was selected by the committee to install the sculpture, Puryear was already an established artist, but he since, in the 40 years since, has come to be regarded as one of the most important contemporary American sculptors. So I just want to show you briefly Martin Puryear, who was born in 1941 in Washington, D.C. He had his first solo exhibition in 1968, and again, since then has exhibited throughout the world, including public commissions in Europe and Asia and across the United States. In 1989, he represented the U.S. at the Sao Paulo Bienal in Brazil, where he was awarded the festival's grand prize. In 2007, the Museum of Modern Art organized a huge survey of his work, which then traveled to the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art and the Museum of Modern Art in Fort Worth. In 2015, the Art Institute of Chicago organized an exhibition of about 50 years of his works on paper that also was exhibited at the Morgan Library in New York and the Smithsonian American Art Museum in Washington. In 1989, he received a MacArthur Genius Foundation grant and a National Medal of Arts award from President Obama in 2011. And you can see Puryear on the left receiving his award from Obama on the right. In 2019, he represented the US at the 58th Venice Biennale. And so all of this is to say is that Sentinel, which is one of Puryear's first monumental outdoor sculptures, is an important part of the artist's legacy. And we're just incredibly fortunate to have a sculpture and prints by him on our campus. Nick Micros he arrived at Gettysburg in 1978, ostensibly to play football and to study law. He wound up working in the cafeteria and majoring in studio art. And he credits the courses that he took in art history, drawing, and painting with art professor Ingolf Qualley for the change in direction. But it was a first ever sculpture class with Professor Alan Paulson during his sophomore year, which really sealed his fate. Alan was the first artist Micros had ever met, and Alan mentored him and invited him to be a member of the ad hoc sculpture committee and to assist Puryear with the installation that fall. And like many Gettysburg College students, the semester he spent studying abroad in Florence, Italy was incredibly impactful. And then he says, working on Sentinel with Martin Puryear felt like being a part of history. And so after spending the fall with Puryear in Gettysburg, Nick returned to New York and began to exhibit his sculpture extensively in one-person and group exhibitions. He established a studio in Long Island City, and impressively, in the 1980s, also served as a stone carving assistant to another incredibly prominent sculptor, Louise Bourgeois. Additionally, he worked as a conservator of historic sculpture around the Northeast. And then in 2001, he moved with his wife, Karen, and his two children to her hometown in the countryside near Zurich, Switzerland. And there he has established a sculpture studio and school. And Nick is the recipient of numerous grants and awards, including a Paul Krasner Foundation grant, 4 individual artist grants from the state of Zurich, and a John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Fellowship for sculpture. He says that his materials largely remain unchanged since leaving college. He works in stone, plaster, cement, clay, ceramic, bronze, wood, and steel, as well as works on paper. And so he enjoys finding out how so-called traditional materials and processes can be important in art today. In the last 10 years, he has focused on creating larger works in public spaces. And just this past summer, he participated in the exhibition at the Art Museum of Olten in Switzerland. And there on the banks of the mighty Arno River, he exhibited a 20-foot-long welded steel piece entitled Westerman and Utley, Ship in a Bottle, which you can see on the screen. And this is an homage to American artist H.C. Westerman. And I think as another testament to the lifelong impact of a Gettysburg College education, it was conversations with fellow classmate and art historian David McCarthy, and in conversation with Professor Alan Paulson, who initially introduced Nick and David to Westerman's work that resulted in this amazing sculpture that you see. And so today, Nick will be talking mostly about his time with Puryear, but I urge you all to check out his work on his website. And then just finally, a few more thanks. I want to just say thank you to the Colby Fellowship Program and to Maureen Forrestal for supporting Merlyn's research, to Robin Wagner, Michael Berkner, and Deborah Smith, for generously making possible the acquisition of Puryear's prints to Gettysburg College's permanent art collection, to Alan Paulson and to Dorothea Barrick for sharing their time and their stories with us. And I want to note Dorothea should be credited for some of the photographs that we have of Puryear's installation. And also finally, the exhibition was supported by the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, Africana Studies, and EPAC. And I want to also thank Martin Puryear himself for his work, for his willingness to work with Gettysburg, and just more recently for being in touch with us and sharing books, images, and his good wishes for today's talk. Please know that this talk is being recorded. We should have time for questions at the end. And in the meantime, feel free to type in your questions and comments into the chat box. And now I'll turn it over to Nick Micros. So thank you all.
Thanks, Shannon, also for that great introduction. We've got a very interesting photo here up on the screen from 1982. I'd like to also thank you and Merlyn for really organizing a great exhibition. It was really time to do something like this. I'm surprised it didn't happen years ago. Such an important work. It's an honor for me to be here today. Hello to everybody listening. Greetings from Switzerland. The sun is going down. The weather is very similar to how it was when we worked out on the piece in 1982 in the fall. There's about 20 sheep out the window here. They just showed up this morning. Farmer put them out. So we're a long way from New York City. Happy to be here. I think this is a really important exhibition that you've done. I'm a witness, I guess, to this historical event, as is David McCarthy, who's participating today. I guess I'm a sort of native son of the college, and I had a great experience at Gettysburg. The experience of working with Martin was a great opportunity. Opened my eyes in a lot of ways in new directions. It was an important experience. I think the measure of that is the details of the work that we did, and the events have stayed with me all these 40 years and are still very present. So that's a sign to me that it was something very important, and I had my eyes open and my ears open, and I knew I was in a position to learn something and that I needed to pay attention. I had a great experience with the art department, and this event was really a great cap to the 4 years that I'd been at Gettysburg. There were many other courses at Gettysburg that influenced me, not just the art courses, of course, poetry with Professor Clark, and literature with Professor Fredrickson, biology with Dr. Cavalier, who was a part of the organizing committee. So all the courses brought me in a direction in life and consciousness that I had not ever anticipated, especially since I was really planning to play football and not go into art full time. As Shannon explained, I was the student rep on this committee that was involved with organizing and choosing Martin as a sculptor. That was a whole process that Alan was really involved with. I had been away in Florence for a semester when a lot of the organizing was going on. My wish, there were some thoughts of going to grad school after Gettysburg, but my wish was really to work for other artists as an assistant. And I had approached Isamu Noguchi the winter before, showed up at his door looking for work, and he was very nice to me and bowed to me and said it was an honor that I came, but that he didn't need any assistance. So working with Martin really fulfilled part of that wish to work under an artist to learn about being a sculptor. I had a lot of, thank you, Shannon, that's good. I had a lot of experience working with stone as a student. I had worked in a J term in a monument shop on Long Island. I'd been in Florence working with a sculptor, and so I had a kind of an experience with stone, so that made me a good candidate to work with Martin. Some of my memories now, going back to the how things went down. There there was an exhibition in the gallery. Martin had been chosen, and he sent a very nice, well-crafted box to the college. It looked like a sculpture itself, and in that box there were models and drawings for his proposal for the sculpture. And I feel like he had a pretty free hand. I mean, the models and things were sent for a kind of look-see for people, but it seemed like he had a pretty free hand to do what he wanted to do, which is a pretty nice thing for an artist. So we got this box, and with other students, we installed this exhibition so that the college could see, people could come and see what was being planned. And at that time afterwards, Martin contacted me and asked me if I would assist him. And I said, of course, yes, but that meant staying the summer and part of the fall in Gettysburg, which I was happy to do because I had just met a wonderful woman, Barb Jagey, a fellow student, and we wanted to stay together for a little while longer. So we wound up moving up onto Washington Street. So we had a nice summer and a fall together, which may not have happened anyway. So that was a nice plus. So it went, and after graduation in the fall, I guess in September, Martin came. He drove from Chicago, and he arrived in the evening, and he came to our place, and I made a nice Greek chicken and orzo dinner for him, and he ate with us. And he had a U-Haul trailer with his molds, and he went out to a motel outside of town and stayed for the night. Then came back in the next day, and we loaded his molds and things into my studio, which I'd gotten a studio outside of just off campus so that I could work away from the college. My impression of Martin was that this is a very cool guy, very cool. I mean, in a cool sense of a cool guy. I was impressed with him. He was a reserved man, very smart, very articulate, confident, an impressive guy. And that was my first impression of him. And then we had to go find a place for him to stay. He needed to find an apartment in town or a room. And he wanted to be close to the college. And we went to some of the rooming houses on the edge of the campus. And this is something that will always stay with me. And I mention it because it's part of my memories of the experience of working with Martin. We went to one of the rooming houses, and there were vacancy signs outside, and the door was closed pretty abruptly in our face. And then we went to another one, and it happened again. And then I, who had not experienced anything like that really at all, I said to Martin, did you see that? I mean, did you notice that? And he just laughed, and I said, I mean, how does that make you feel? And he just laughed. He said, if they don't want me, I don't want them. And he kind of shrugged it off, and he wound up getting a place back outside of town, and he had to travel into town about 20 minutes every day. But he said it didn't bother him because he was from Chicago, and he was happy to be out in the cornfields to jog in the morning and to have a little country experience. But that was an experience that I won't ever forget well. We got to the site, and you can see here, there was a cement foundation poured. We went about collecting stones. Dottie Barracks present today. Her family owned a limestone quarry, and they also kiln lime for building purposes. And Dottie had been working at the college in the art department as an independent in printmaking. So I'd known her. She's already an established artist. And so we could go down to Barrack limestone, and we picked some blue limestone out, nice blue limestone. During the excavation for the foundation, there were some stones there from a building that demolished. I had some stone, and through the construction guys who poured the footing, we were told about some broken down barns on sort of abandoned land and stuff. So we kind of went out in my 1960 pickup truck, Chevy, and we just started collecting stone and bringing it to the site. And so you can see here, somehow I also had good sense to take pictures. I don't remember Martin having a camera. I could be wrong, but I don't remember him taking any pictures. Maybe he had delegated that to me. I said, I'll take pictures. And of course, these pictures were taken and developed by myself in the college lab. So I think they have a really great, all these years later, really great quality, you know. So Martin had these molds, which he had made, and they look a lot like his sculptures, the kind of basket forms. Yeah, that's good. And he must have made a wood positive, I assume, of the form, and then built this mold around it in sections. And we laid the form up and started working inside, laying up stone with mortar, cement, lime, and sand. So, and basically building them up against the inside of the form. So there really wasn't a lot of choice in terms of the form. That was a given. And we were choosing stones for size, color, but also not that much. I think there was also a random aspect to the way that the stones went in. And we were buttering up these stones and trying to keep the mortar away from the outside of the wall, so that we could control the look of the stone. So you can see here Martin working inside, and then the form going up. That's his, on the right there, that's his old 70s Suburban, this kind of a old truck back there that he rolled in from Chicago with. I don't think he's driving things like that anymore. And it was very simple. And I would say, you know, it was really like a kind of a construction job, you know, humping stone, screwing things together, putting scaffold up, mixing mortar. I was doing the mixing, mortar mixing, really very simple. The form, the stones, the scaffold, bags of the cement and lime and sand, and a mixing machine. So pretty simple and also cost effective. There you see some of the mortar there. You know, the atmosphere was also very easygoing, quiet. Martin wasn't bossy or anything. Very, very, very pleasant. Not a lot of chatting, except in the breaks at lunch. And we were very exposed, I would say. You know, here are two guys working in the middle of the campus, classes, students coming and going, class in, class out. So we were kind of on display there. You know, it was kind of a performance as well, which makes it also hard to concentrate and get work done. But it was also a good experience because it helped people understand what was going on, and it brought it down to earth and made it more accessible, which I think was a very wise choice that we worked on when things were going on. You can see here at a certain point, there were discussions about the stability of the piece, whether we were building it hollow, which is very important to Martin because if you know his work, he likes these sort of hollow interior forms and this kind of contrast between the skin of something and this mysterious inside space that you can't see into. But there were some concerns on the campus about vandalism, that of like 20 tough football players like getting drunk and pushing this thing over or something. And these were discussions that we had. And I had been there for 4 years, and I said, you know, Martin, I would fill it with cement to make it more. So because I've seen some things happen, and you know, in retrospect, I think probably would have been okay because it's pretty stable. But I said I might do it, you know, and that's what was done. So you see, it's a pretty cool picture of, you know, it's being filled up. It also made it easier to work from the inside. as the piece was going up. And I don't believe we filled it all the way. I think we just filled it up to this level, maybe. I don't know if we filled it a second time. I don't think it's totally filled. That's something I don't quite remember. At a certain point, there was an information evening in the new art building up in one of the classrooms. And a lot of people came, and there was a lot of questions. And I remember Martin scrambling, to get people to try to understand what he was trying to do. And he talked a lot about non-objective art, what that means, that a work of art is not necessarily, doesn't always refer to something, it's a thing in itself. And this was also, all these things were very interesting to me because it's stuff that I had not heard, so all this stuff is going on. And I mean, as a young man, the technical stuff, the things that are being talked about, the way people were reacting, this was an incredible learning experience, a laboratory for me, which to this day, I mean, this morning I went out to a potential client who wants to commission a sculpture from me, and I had to explain my piece, what I want to do to these nice people. And I learned a lot there about that, how you can do this. And Martin, but it wasn't so easy. There was a lot of resistance, of course, but that's always with art that's risky, that takes risks. There's always going to be polarization, and that's one of the tasks of art, and that's how it fits into freedom of speech and democracy. So this is something also became apparent to me. Maybe we've got the piece built up. We mortared in all these joints, then were filled with mortar. They weren't filled when the forms came off, so we had to go back up, down the piece and fill everything. And this fellow on the left is Martin's father. His family came up one day to visit, and he jumped up on the scaffold and started helping us. Very nice man. His mother was there and some of his siblings. So that was nice. Maybe the next one, Shannon. So you can see these are very fat. The piece was restored, wasn't it, Shannon, at a certain point, or conserved?
Yeah, so in 2004, it got a full conservation treatment, and we just recently are in step one of another conservation assessment with the same sculpture conservator who worked on it in 2004. But I'm pleased to report that the initial assessment of the conservators, that it's in good shape, that you all did a beautiful job, and it was interesting to hear the conservator just again in his just an initial very casual conversation with us talk about just sort of the stones that are placed kind of in their natural organic geological orientation. So so the stones that were selected where the the sediment is the strata. I'm not a geologist, so I don't know if I'm using the right language.
Well, yeah, I think that wasn't so much something that we thought about, but I think a lot of the stones are naturally broken that way, so that would have been a good coincidence. What's interesting that, of course, this piece is like a building, like an old barn, and every 50 years, usually a building. This is stuff that I learned a lot here about materials, which I later could use in my work and also in restoration. This piece is really like a structure. It's like a barn, or a building, or old stone building. And usually mortar joints are meant to be sacrificial. That means the structure stands by itself, but the mortar is meant to keep moisture and water out and rain. And that's meant to be sacrificial. That means if the mortar is mixed right, it's going to come loose, and it needs to be chiseled out and replaced. And this is a very interesting question for a piece where all of this work here is hand done by Martin and myself, and supervised by him. So that's a very important issue that needs to be addressed. If this was a stone barn, they would just chip all this out and replace it, and it would be good for another 50 years. But that's it. This is part of the artwork. All those mortar joints, the way we buttered it in, it's an important part of the work. And these are very fat mortar joints, and usually fat mortar joints tend to come loose earlier than normal thin joints between stones and brick. And it's kind of interesting. I've seen pictures of the piece restored. They seem to be holding very well, so that's very interesting. One, maybe go ahead. There's some other nice angles of the piece, very clean. And now you'll see later pictures of it's gotten a certain patina of age, which is also nice. I believe we put a waterproofing. That was another question, graffiti from the college administration. We put a graffiti coating on it, silicone, to make it easier to take graffiti off if something happened.
That was another question, yeah, that the conservator had for us, is what kind of sealant was used, and if you used a sealant.
There was a coating. There were these sort of coatings that you could buy pretty much on, from a hardware store to seal brick and stuff. We put that on there also as a precaution.
Yeah. And I also want to note, so the foundation, right, was dug pretty deep and filled in with cement.
Before the frost level, yeah, and deeper, pretty deep, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then the decision was made right after the excavation and the construction to have the grass come up really close, for it to be a part of the landscape and to not have it, surrounded by cement or gravel or some other kind of aesthetic decision in terms of the landscape. And so that was something else that interestingly, the conservator had mentioned, that we do have just a little margin around it. So when our facilities crew mows the grass, that they don't get too close with the lawnmower to the sculpture, but that it is kind of embedded in the landscape as Martin intended it to be.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, those are important concerns, also that it withstands time and things like that. I mean, looking at the piece and thinking about it and knowing how it was made, I think people tend to think this is a permanent thing that can't ever be moved, but that's not really true. I mean, I've seen things moved you wouldn't believe: stone structures, stone columns, monuments that were moved from one place to the other. So if somebody if the college got into financial trouble and they wanted to sell it or something like that, never. Just so you know, there's ways.
But to that point, though, or counter to that point, that he specifically chose this location, though, because of how, where it is located on the campus, and going from town to the dining hall, past Gladfelter Hall and the Science Center, you encounter it one way, and then walking back or walking, east to west, you encounter it another way. And I think too that these photographs that you took are really remarkable, in that when the library is behind you and Gladfelter is in front of you, that it looks like a column. Yeah. And that when you see it from another direction, it looks like a wall, and that it changes kind of remarkably, it changes shape as you walk around it, and the placement of it is pretty smart, in that you do encounter it, the different ways every single time you pass by it.
Yeah. I mean, definitely this is one of the great things about the piece, is this idea of where you're standing affects how you see something. Perspective, standpoint, philosophy, it goes mushrooms out into everything, Okay, maybe, yeah. And there's a photo from Dottie Barrick, that great ectochrome slide, green, blue, which you don't see anymore. That really, I miss that. Digital photography is always so perfect. It's fall, and we cleaned up, and the molds got taken down to what they call the boneyard, or the dump behind the facilities building. Some of it got saved, and now it's there. And Martin went back to Chicago, and And I stayed a little while longer and went back to New York. Maybe you can go down another.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yes, yeah.
this is a bit of thievery on my part, you know, probably unethical or whatever, but we didn't just work all the time. You know, we also went out, we would go out for drinks, and other students would come. And you know, people who know Gettysburg, Wolf's Pub is still there, I assume. The pub is still there, must be. And that was the popular place in Gettysburg. I had worked there for a while as a bouncer also. It was one of my jobs at the college to pay the bills. And we had some pretty interesting conversations. This was a napkin that Martin was telling us about, a project that he was planning for New Orleans, that a public piece that never was built. And that's kind of a sketch on it on the left. And then I took the napkin when we left and stuck it in my pocket, and then wrote down on the back, you know, Martin Puryear sketch, what it was, Wolf's Pub, October '82. Couple things I remember in there. I think one time I was a little bit fresh, and I said to him, you know, I mean, how did you get this commission? You got lucky, I guess. And he got a little bit red on that, and he said, look, he said, I've been doing this stuff since I was your age. Nothing about lucky, you know. So that was also a humbling moment, and you know, chalk it up to being a fresh young kid. But you know, the amount of work, years of work, and being on the job to create these opportunities, of course, I wound up being able to appreciate later myself as I threw my hat into the ring. Another interesting thing I remember, we were talking about tradition in sculpture, something that stayed with me. And I was saying, well, you know, all this stuff with stone, I was of course using stone a lot, and wood, Alan Paulson, wood carver, and Martin with his love of wood and these materials. This kind of tradition is this, it's like going backwards to something, you know. And he said, no, he said, it's going forward. And that was very important for me to hear, that it wasn't necessarily being nostalgic, that there were ways, it was important these materials could really contribute something. And I think I read something in a catalog about him where they were comparing him to Bob Dylan, where Bob Dylan did something very similar by taking old music, folk music, and like a jewel in the dust, and brushing it off and redesigning it, making it valid for the present, his present, and continuing presence. It's interesting that Martin is one day older than Bob Dylan. His birthday is the day before Bob Dylan's. So I think it's very interesting. That was something also, you know, this is a generational thing where you get a kind of validation and also encouragement. Okay, this could be a good path. Yeah, and when we parted, I gave Martin a drawing of mine. I framed it, had a drawing, and I gave it to him as a present. And he said, Nick, I'll make sure I send you something. And he did, and he sent me this drawing, which is really pretty much like the drawings that were shown in the gallery before the piece started. And it really shows the schematic of the piece, the molds, and it's something I treasure. It's signed to me, and it hangs here in our living room. So maybe the next one.
Yeah.
So that's the piece today, right? So you see it's got a bit of a patina, you know, like an old statue somewhere on the battlefield or in a public place in New York. You know, it's an authentic piece. I think out of a lot of Martin's public pieces, this is really a piece that it has his handprint really all over, you know, and mine as well. But of course, it's Martin's piece, it's his design, and I assisted him in the tradition of whatever. Bernini had many assistants, in Rodin and Henry Moore. I worked for Louise later on. That was just also a coincidence that she found me working in a monument shop, looking for someone to help her. This is tradition in sculpture of of younger artists assisting more established artists with commissions, and it's a fact of sculpture that it's labor intensive, you know. And I think what makes the piece in Gettysburg unique, when you look at a lot of Martin's public pieces, they're mostly fabricated, you know, and it's his design. But this piece is really authentic in the sense that it's like a drawing or a painting. It's got a lot of choices of the artist are in this piece, you know. And there's Lorraine Keller. Wow.
Hey, Nick,
Hi, Lorraine.
how you doing?
Good. Nice to see you.
Look familiar?
Yeah. Wow. Nice to see you, kid.
Yeah, hold on, let me say, I'm gonna put Tim on real quick. This is crazy.
I gotta finish up my talk here.
Oh, go ahead, I'm
Then
so
there's
sorry.
Questions afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay, keep
Okay.
going.
Nice to see you. Yeah, so to kind of sum up a little bit, and do you have my bottle piece there at the?
Yeah, I'll go back. I think I have it at the beginning, so I'm just gonna go back to that.
You know, Martin's way of working and his whole background in sculpture was really unknown to me. So it was really an eye opener. His perspective, where he was coming from, his influences, some I knew, but many I didn't. So that was like, showed me a completely different perspective. Found his work to be very sophisticated. And for me, sculpture was, up until that point, really about labor, carving, working. It was a lot about that. I think that came also from my background in sports, and that was a good transition. But I realized with Martin, it wasn't, you know, just about that. It was also the intellect and thinking about things and getting that perspective. He was also coming out of contemporary art. I mean, he was active in the contemporary scene. He tied me into that a little bit, my consciousness. He also showed me that hey, maybe it's possible to be a sculptor and make a life out of that, to be a creator, and maybe a source of my own kind of creativity. This was all just sort of like verging at that point. And it kind of pointed me back to New York, to see what was going on there. But the New York that I got to was the 80s, and things were changing, and postmodernism was coming in. Figuration wasn't as taboo as it had been. So I went looking for my own direction. You know, I really understood this thing of art being something that activates your consciousness, that doesn't try to manipulate it. That's something I continue to follow. And I just would like to finish up, just to read a quote from the catalog, this wonderful catalog that you guys made, which I think is very fitting. And Martin writes, says, "I think once art leaves the hand of the artist, leaves the studio, it's really announcing itself to the world. And it's not my place to tell you what you are looking at, or even what I meant to do with it, because sometimes I don't know consciously myself." So I think that's in the piece at Gettysburg, and that's something that I've also tried to follow myself. Yeah.
Great.
So I think that's maybe if anybody has any
Yeah.
questions, we have time for some questions or input or anything.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you, Nick. So I'm going to open it up. We have a lovely, nice big crowd here. So I'm going to open it up for questions. If you are if you don't want to speak up into the camera, I'm happy to read questions in the chat. So please feel free to put any questions you'd like to in the chat box. Yeah, Austin, go ahead.
Hi, Nicholas. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, I hear you, Austin. Yep.
I know you may have covered this slightly, but I wondered if you could just elaborate a little bit more on how working on the sculpture, particularly, and the process of working with Martin influenced your own sculptures, like the materials that you work with.
Well, I think when you work with someone like that, it's kind of like going into the lion's den as an artist, so to speak. There's things to be learned, but there's also dangers. And the danger is all artists don't want to copy other artists. There's this great book, The Anxiety of Influence by Bloom, that talks about that all artists are influenced by other artists, whether they like it or not. And usually their style is determined by how they move away from that influence, how they react to it. So it's a complicated thing, like a father-son, mother-daughter relationship of becoming yourself and independent. So there were many things in Martin's work that I really appreciated, but also there were things that I knew they didn't fit to me. And so the process of becoming an adult as an artist is sorting all of these things out, you know. My temperament is a bit more expressive. And of course, the next generation gets into something else. So getting into New York, the figuration had become less taboo as it was in the 70s. Narration came in, and these were some of the problems that I tried to address in my work. But I didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater because I loved abstraction. That's what I was raised on. So I think if you look at my work, like that big bottle piece there, there's a bit of a Puryear in there. It's like a big cagey thing, but it's really an object of narration. There's a theme in it that you can talk about. It's less non-objective than Martin's work. But what really gave me a lot of strength was, you know, if I want to work with stone, if I want to work with cement, if I want to work with wood, you know, and if I don't want to work with video and photography and do performances and stuff, which was also really happening a lot in the mainstream art world, that's okay too. So that was a big thing for me. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? So one thing that we were chatting about before the talk really got started was the feedback on campus to the sculpture. And I'm sorry, David McCarthy had to leave us, but maybe this is something Dorothea can talk about. People who might have been on campus at the time can speak to. And Merlyn did a great job kind of scouring all of the newspaper articles that were published, you know, in the Gettysburg Times, and the Gettysburgian, even in the Harrisburg papers about the response to Sentinel at the time. And so let anyone jump in on that.
Okay, well, I think that it's funny because my grandson was just here and he read the catalog and he's working at the college. So he was saying that, yes, Gettysburg was a little reluctant back then. And I had some friends who were Civil War reenactors, and they, you know, it was just way beyond them, all this time and money spent on this piece. But I think a lot, you know, we've all grown in concepts. And it was very, to me, thinking back, Shannon, it was very bold of the college to commission Martin to do this sculpture, the abstractness.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there were many editorials which you all have dug up. And but I just had the reaction from the Civil War reenactors that, you know, and various people in town could not fathom it. They did appreciate the work, though, the technical ability.
Nick, I have two good questions for you in the chat. The first one was, what was it like to work with Louise Bourgeois? which could be probably another hour-long talk. And then also, this is a great question too from Robin Wagner about the name Sentinel. Was it named before it was constructed or during the building of it? Like when did he, when would a sculptor, when did Martin Puryear in particular come up with that name, if you recall?
To the first question, that would take a whole nother presentation to talk about working with Louise, but I would just say fantastic, not easy, an adventure, all incredible things. Just imagine, you're 23 years old and you're in like some dank studio in Brooklyn, working on stones with Louise Bourgeois, who more or less comes out of a whole nother time period. Really, that was an experience, and also really just not look for it, all happened by coincidence, chance. But that would be for another time. That was an incredible experience that also, I would say, I didn't go to graduate school, but I think working with, of course, I had great experience at the college during my bachelor period in Florence, working with Martin, working with Louise, and a lot of the conservation work that I did, that was for me, my graduate school. I got paid and I didn't have to pay, and I got a lot of practical experience and intellectual experience. So I always considered that to be my kind of master's, but it wouldn't help me get a teaching job in the US at a college. But the name of Sentinel, that came later. It stands as a sentinel. For me, that wasn't talked about at all while we were working. That came after. That came after, and also it had something to do, I think, with watching over time. The college has been there for so long. It is a sentinel itself.
Not yet. I'm going to bring them out in a minute.
And I think also it has something to do with the word sesquicentennial, if you ask me. I think the word the 150th anniversary of the college is the sesquicentennial, and I think it's poetically in the title as well. But it is something that's meant like a monument to witness over generations and stand guard and also to preserve certain values, but other values than a Civil War figurative monument. Yeah.
Austin, Janet. Yeah.
Yes. I can remember some very bad reactions on the part of students. They thought it was a giant phallus. And at one point, I think they tried to put a condom on it of some kind. I don't know whether it was paint or plastic or what, but so when we were doing the freshman colloquy or the first year colloquy, there was a Puryear exhibit going on at the Sculpture Museum in Washington. And so we took a lot of the first year classes down to see that exhibit. And that was a really wonderful exhibit showing his use of earthen materials and basket type constructions and wood constructions. And I think it helped all of us understand the Sentinel a little better after seeing some of his other work on display. So I've always loved it, and because I love barns and I love I love the stonework around Adams County, and I think that's what Puryear was trying to capture.
I think that's true. I think that's very true. I think Martin talked about that coming up to Gettysburg as a child. with his family. They took trips up to South Central Pennsylvania, and that was a memory for him. These barns, that's in there, and it's indigenous to the European settlers all over the place. And I think that was really very conscious in the work. You have this dichotomy. You have this very abstract form that, hey, what the heck is that? And then you have this very normal kind of building technique, which is everywhere. So it's kind of bringing you in contradictory positions, thoughts, associations. That's what Martin often plays with in his work. Preconceptions, I remember there were people who, some people were upset, and some people said, hey, this is cool. But really, as Dottie said, to take a chance on something like that, and do that at the college, you have to take your hat off to Alan Paulson and Dean Nordval and Professor Cavalier, to get behind something like that. But it really reflected contemporary trends. I mean, this is post-minimalism. This is what was going on in sculpture. That's why Martin was chosen. He was on a list. And so it was really right in there, and although it wasn't something that it really brought contemporary art right there in the face of people. So in that sense, it was pretty normal a thing to do. But also, a college campus, what's a college campus about? It's about also bringing in controversial ideas for discussion and discourse, and that's what it's done. And I think to this day, the piece has retained that energy. It kind of floats. Some people think, what the heck is that? And some people are attracted to it. And it creates a kind of a richness of discussion, and I mean, it was a great opportunity for Martin, springboard to many other things, so I think it was very important to him, to do the piece and to have that opportunity,
And I like to see how he revisited the work in the print that we have on display in the gallery right now, and lean to that because of the stonework, that it's sort of unmistakably Sentinel. And then I think, Nick, you and I were chatting about some drawings that were included in the catalog for the Art Institute show that was also at the Smithsonian American Art Museum that looked like Sentinel. And his studio confirmed that those were done in the spirit of Sentinel, but after Sentinel was made. And I just got that email this morning that he was revisiting the idea of Sentinel and the significance of that stonework that is very, very much rooted in the architecture of South Central Pennsylvania.
I mean, that form that's there in Sentinel, that form has been repeated in his work over and over again. And it makes you think, really, what does it have a meaning somehow? Is there something that he associates with it? Not just that people can see different things in it. Is there something, it's something that really, it's like a theme in a jazz song that keeps coming back and coming back, and it has something very concrete about it as well, in a sense. That's something that, it's a simple but very complex form, and I think Martin is also kind of, there's different kinds of artists. He's an artist who kind of stays in a very kind of a narrow path that he fleshes out endlessly, certain objects, certain ways, and then there are artists who move out more, but he's the artist who, this kind of focus and concentration, I'm in awe of that. But it's something that I don't tend towards myself, that's not my spirit. But I mean, I think it's incredibly, the richness of it, there's different ways for artists to work,
So we are just, we're at 1 o'clock right now. So I'm going to stop the recording, kind of like formally end our virtual gallery talk. So thank you, Nick, so much for your time, for being here from Switzerland. I'm going to stay on. I'm going to keep the Zoom meeting open for a little while longer. If anyone wants to catch up with Nick a little bit more informally or ask some questions. But again, thanks so much for everybody for tuning in, and hope to see you in person around the gallery sometime soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank